The bridge of the radiant dawn was silent except for the soft hum of failing systems. Commander Velsera stood before the massive viewing screen, her forearms clasped behind her back in a posture that her people had maintained for thousands of years. It was the stance of a leader, of someone in control, but right now she felt neither. The screen showed the third colony world burning. Karvath Prime, home to 40 million of her people, was surrounded by a living nightmare. The Zelthor swarm had arrived 3 days ago, and nothing the Karvathi fleet threw at them made any difference. Their beautiful crystalline ships, their advanced plasma weapons, their tactical superiority meant nothing against an enemy that simply refused to die. Velsera watched another defense platform explode in silence. The swarm was like nothing they had ever encountered before. Each ship was a living thing, a writhing mass of biological tissue that could adapt to any weapon within minutes. Shoot it with lasers and it grew reflective armor. Hit it with kinetic rounds and it developed dense bone plating, fire plasma, and it learned to absorb the heat and use it as fuel. Worse still, they never stopped coming. For every swarm ship destroyed, 10 more took its place. They reproduced faster than the Karvathi could kill them. Her second officer approached, his own 4 arms trembling slightly. His name was Telvorn, and he had served with her for 15 years. She had never seen fear in his eyes before today. "Commander, the Council is waiting for your response," he said quietly. Velsera turned away from the screen. The Council had made their decision an hour ago, and she had been avoiding this moment ever since. Her people, the proud Karvathi Empire, masters of 12 star systems, apex of culture and technology in this region of space, were about to do something unthinkable. They were going to beg for help. The very idea made her sick. For 3,000 years, the Karvathi had stood alone. They had never needed assistance from lesser species. They had never bent knee to anyone. Their empire was built on self-sufficiency and superiority. Other races came to them for help, not the other way around. But pride meant nothing to the dead. She walked to her command chair and activated the communications array. The faces of the 12 council members appeared on smaller screens around her. Each one looked as defeated as she felt. High Counselor Renthak spoke first. His voice carried the weight of their entire civilization. "Commander Velsera, have you prepared the message?" She wanted to say no. She wanted to tell them that there had to be another way, that they could still fight, that surrendering their pride was worse than death. But she had seen the tactical reports. She knew the truth. In 72 hours, maybe less, Karvath Prime would fall. After that, the swarm would move to the next colony, then the next, until nothing remained of their empire but empty ships and silent cities. "Yes, High Counselor. The distress beacon is ready. Then send it. Let the galaxy know that we ask for mercy. Let them know that we need help." The words tasted like poison, but Velsera nodded. She signaled to Telvorn, who began the transmission sequence. The message was simple, stripped of all the formal language the Karvathi normally used. It was pure desperation translated into standard galactic code. "This is Commander Velsera of the Karvathi Empire. We are under attack by an unknown hostile force designated Zelthor Swarm. Our defenses are failing. Our colonies are dying. We request immediate assistance from any species capable of rendering aid. We ask for mercy. We ask for help. Please, if anyone can hear this, we are running out of time." The message broadcast on all frequencies, spreading out through space at the speed of light. It would take hours to reach the nearest civilizations, days to reach the far edges of known space. They might not have days. Velsera dismissed the council and returned to watching the battle. Her remaining ships were fighting bravely, but it was like trying to hold back an ocean with a net. The swarm simply flowed around every defense, adapting to every tactic. She thought about how they had gotten here. 6 years ago, her people had discovered a small colony of unknown organisms on a resource-rich asteroid in disputed space. The things had been growing there, building strange organic structures. The Karvathi science team had deemed them a contamination, a pest species that needed to be eliminated before they could properly mine the asteroid, so they had eliminated them. Completely. Burned the entire asteroid down to bare rock, sterilized every trace of biological matter. It had been standard procedure, nothing more than pest control. They hadn't known the creatures were intelligent. They hadn't known those organisms were part of a vast hive intelligence spread across multiple systems. They hadn't known that killing that small colony was like cutting off a finger from a sleeping giant. Now the giant was awake. and it wanted revenge. 3 parsecs away aboard the UHSV Valkyrie, Admiral Jake Morrison was finishing his 3rd cup of coffee when the distress signal reached his ship. The Valkyrie was the flagship of humanity's 7th Fleet, a massive warship designed for exactly one purpose: to fight and win in the most hostile environment space could offer. Morrison was a career military man, 53 years old, with gray hair and a face that looked like it had been carved from stone. He had fought in the Centauri Rebellion, commanded the defense of Mars during the Raider Wars, and spent the last 10 years patrolling the outer edges of human space looking for threats. Today he found one. Lieutenant Amy Porter, his tactical officer, brought him the message. She was young, barely 30, but sharp as a knife and twice as quick. Admiral, we're picking up a distress call. Unknown species under attack by something called the Zelthor Swarm. Morrison set down his coffee and pulled up the data on his personal screen. The message was desperate, almost panicked. He could hear the fear in the alien commander's voice even through the translation software. Location? He asked. 3.2 parsecs, sir. Just outside our patrol boundary. Fleet status? All ships ready and operational, sir. We're at 85% combat effectiveness. Morrison nodded. The 7th Fleet consisted of 16 warships, ranging from the massive Valkyrie down to smaller but equally deadly cruisers and destroyers. They also had 4 fighter carriers loaded with the best pilots humanity could produce. It was enough firepower to crack a small planet if necessary. He opened a fleet-wide channel. All ships, this is Admiral Morrison. We've received a distress call from an unknown species under attack by an aggressive hostile force. I'm ordering the fleet to jump to these coordinates. Plot your solutions and prepare for immediate combat operations. We don't know what we're walking into, so keep your weapons hot and your shields up. We leave in 20 minutes. Captain Greg Hamilton appeared on a secondary screen. He commanded the carrier UHSV Warhawk, one of humanity's newest and most advanced ships. He was younger than Morrison, 42, with an easy smile that hit a tactical mind like a steel trap. Admiral, do we know anything about this enemy, or the species asking for help? Nothing on either count, Greg, but someone's in trouble and we're the closest fleet. That's enough for me. Hamilton nodded. Understood, sir. Warhawk will be ready to jump on your order. Morrison closed the channel and stood up, walking to the massive viewing port that dominated one wall of his command deck. Beyond the transparent metal, space stretched out in all directions, beautiful and deadly. Lieutenant Commander Ryan Cross, the fleet's xenobiology specialist, approached with a tablet. Ryan was a scientist first and a military officer second, but he was damn good at both jobs. Admiral, I've been analyzing what little data we have from that distress call. This swarm they mentioned, the linguistic analysis suggests it's a biological entity, not mechanical. Like an organism? More like millions of organisms acting as one. A hive intelligence, possibly. If that's the case, conventional tactics might not work. They could adapt to our weapons. Morrison smiled, and it wasn't a nice expression. Ryan, conventional tactics are what everyone else uses. We're humans. We don't do conventional, Ryan smiled back. Fair point, sir. 20 minutes later, the 7th Fleet jumped into hyperspace, leaving empty space behind them. They were heading toward a war they knew nothing about, to help a species they had never met, to fight an enemy they didn't understand. But that was what humans did. When someone called for help, they came. When someone needed mercy, they offered it. And when someone needed an enemy destroyed, well, humanity had 3,000 years of experience in warfare, on the deadliest planet in known space. Earth had tried to kill humans with everything from predators to plagues to natural disasters, and humans had survived it all. Now they were bringing that survival instinct, that aggression, that unwillingness to quit to the stars. The Zelthor swarm was about to learn what happened when you threatened someone under human protection. They had asked for mercy. They were going to get war instead. The human fleet tore through hyperspace like a blade through silk. Inside the Valkyrie, Admiral Morrison stood on his command deck watching the countdown timer tick toward 0. Around him, his crew worked with calm efficiency, each person focused on their task. There was no panic, no fear, just professionals doing what they had trained their entire lives to do. Lieutenant Amy Porter called out from her station. 30 seconds to emergence, Admiral. All ships report ready status. Morrison nodded. Weapons free the moment we drop out. I want full tactical scans immediately. If something's shooting at those aliens, I want to know where it is and how to kill it. The timer hit 0, and reality snapped back into focus. The Karvathi home system spread out before them, and Morrison's first thought was that it was beautiful. 3 planets orbited a yellow star very similar to Earth's sun. The second planet was clearly the homeworld, covered in gleaming cities that caught the starlight. But his attention was immediately drawn to the third planet, where the battle was happening. Commander Lisa Grant, his weapons officer, whistled softly. "Sir, you need to see this." The tactical display lit up with contacts. Hundreds of them. Maybe thousands surrounding the third planet like a swarm of angry insects. Each contact was irregular, organic-looking. They pulsed and shifted on the screen like living things. "That's the enemy?" Morrison asked. "That appears to be the swarm, yes, sir. And those smaller contacts trying to hold them back, those must be the Karvathi ships." Morrison studied the display. The alien ships were elegant, almost crystalline in design. They were also getting torn apart. As he watched, 3 more disappeared from the screen, overwhelmed by dozens of swarm ships. "Open a channel to the Karvathi fleet. Let them know we're here." A moment later, a face appeared on his main screen. The alien was humanoid, but with 4 arms and skin that shimmered with an opalescent quality. Her eyes were large and golden, and right now they were wide with shock. Commander Velsera stared at the ships that had just appeared on her sensors. She had been expecting help, maybe a small fleet from one of the nearby trading civilizations. What she got instead looked like an invasion force, 16 warships, each one massive and covered in weapons. Their design was brutal, efficient, with none of the aesthetic grace her people valued. These ships weren't built to look impressive. They were built to kill. Her communications officer managed to establish a link, and Velsera found herself looking at a human for the first time. The creature was strange, with flat features and small eyes. But there was something in those eyes that made her shiver. This was a predator looking back at her. "Unknown vessels, we are the Karvathi," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "We sent the distress signal. We request mercy and humanitarian assistance against the Zelthor invasion force." The human didn't smile. "This is Admiral Jake Morrison of the United Human Space Forces. We received your distress call." "Where's the enemy?" Velsera blinked. No diplomatic greeting, no formal introductions, no establishing of credentials or discussion of terms, just straight to business. "The Zelthor swarm has surrounded our third colony world, Karvath Prime," she explained quickly. "We have 48 hours before they breach the last shields, but we cannot hold them back. Our weapons are ineffective against their adaptive defenses. We need evacuation support, refugee ships, anything you can—" "Understood," Morrison cut her off. "Keep your ships in defensive formation around your homeworld. We'll handle this." Before Velsera could respond, the human ships were already accelerating toward Karvath Prime. She watched in disbelief as they pushed their engines to speeds that should have torn the ships apart. Her own vessels could never handle that kind of acceleration without killing the crew. How are they surviving those forces? Telvorn asked beside her. Velsera had no answer. She could only watch as the human fleet charged directly toward a swarm that had destroyed everything she had thrown at it. Aboard the Valkyrie, Morrison was getting his first good look at the enemy. Ryan Cross was right. These things were definitely biological. Each ship looked like a tumor crossed with a squid, all writhing tentacles and pulsing flesh. They moved in coordinated patterns, responding to threats with frightening speed. "Analysis?" Morrison asked. Ryan was already working on it, his fingers dancing across his console. "They're definitely organic, sir. Carbon-based, probably using some kind of biological fusion reactor for power. The hull appears to be adaptive tissue, capable of rapid evolution in response to threats. If we hit them with the same weapon twice, they'll probably develop resistance. So we don't hit them with the same weapon twice," Morrison said simply. "Lisa, what's our loadout?" Commander Lisa Grant smiled. She had been waiting for this question. "We've got kinetic railguns, nuclear missiles, plasma cannons, laser arrays, and the new experimental photon torpedoes. Plus the fighters are carrying their own mixed arsenal." "Good. We're going to throw everything at them. Don't give them time to adapt." Captain Greg Hamilton appeared on the communications screen. He was calling from the carrier Warhawk, which was hanging back slightly from the main formation. "Admiral, my fighters are ready to launch. Lieutenant Nina Blake has Raptor Squadron on standby, and Major Kyle Stevens has Falcon Squadron prepped. Hold for now. Greg, let's see what the big guns can do first." The fleet closed to weapons range, and Morrison gave the order he had been waiting to give. "All ships engage at will. Fire everything. What happened next made Velsera's breath catch in her throat. The human warships opened fire, and the universe became light and thunder. Railguns spat metal slugs at impossible speeds. Nuclear missiles streaked across space, leaving trails of fire. Energy weapons carved burning lines through the darkness. And the swarm, for the first time since this war began, started dying faster than it could adapt. The railgun rounds were the most devastating. They hit with so much kinetic energy that the swarm ships simply exploded, their adaptive tissue unable to harden fast enough to resist. The nuclear warheads were almost as effective, each one creating a sphere of atomic fire that vaporized everything within 100 meters. The swarm tried to respond. Tentacles reached out, firing bioplasma and acid. Some of the attacks hit the human ships, but their shields absorbed the damage easily. These ships had been designed to survive combat in the worst possible conditions. A few organic weapons weren't going to stop them. Morrison watched the tactical display with satisfaction. Looks like they don't adapt as fast as we can kill them. Good. Lisa, keep cycling weapons. Don't give them a pattern to learn. Aboard the missile cruiser UHSV Thunderhead, Captain Helen Ward was having the time of her life. She had been a weapons officer before taking command of her own ship, and she loved making things explode. Right now she was making a lot of things explode. Fire missiles 7 through 12, mix of nuclear and conventional. Target that cluster on the left flank. Her crew executed the order perfectly, and a dozen missiles shot into the swarm formation. The nuclear warheads went first, clearing space with raw atomic fury. The conventional missiles followed, hitting swarm ships that were still reeling from the blast. Scratch 6 more contacts, Captain, her tactical officer reported. Excellent. Reload and prepare for the next salvo. On the radiant dawn, Velsera could only watch in stunned silence. In less than 10 minutes, the humans had destroyed more swarm ships than her entire fleet had managed in 3 days. And they weren't slowing down. How is this possible? Telvorn whispered. Velsera shook her head slowly. I don't know, but I'm beginning to understand why they call themselves Deathworlders. That term had appeared in the human transmission data. Deathworlders. She had assumed it was some kind of military designation, a unit name perhaps. Now she was starting to suspect it meant something much more fundamental. These humans had evolved on a world that tried to kill them every single day. They had survived predators, diseases, disasters, and each other. They had climbed to the top of their food chain through sheer stubborn aggression. And now they had brought that same ruthless survival instinct to space. The swarm had made a terrible mistake. It had threatened someone who called for help, and the humans had answered. But they hadn't come to offer mercy or negotiate peace. They had come to win. Admiral Morrison opened a channel to Captain Hamilton. Greg, I think it's time to let your fighters play. Hamilton's grin was visible even through the screen. About time, sir. Nina, Kyle, you're cleared to launch. Show these things why Earth's gravity makes the best pilots. From the belly of the Warhawk, 2 squadrons of fighters launched into space. Each one was small, fast, and deadly, and each one was piloted by a human who had spent their entire life learning to move, fight, and survive in 1.0 Earth gravity. The Zelthor swarm was about to learn that humanity's greatest weapon wasn't their guns or their ships. It was the fact that they absolutely refused to lose. Lieutenant Nina Blake felt the familiar rush as her fighter launched from the Warhawk's flight deck. The small craft shot into space like a bullet, and she immediately pulled into a hard turn that would have killed most organic beings in the galaxy. Her body, shaped by Earth's heavy gravity since birth, barely noticed the forces trying to crush her into her seat. Behind her, 11 more fighters followed in perfect formation. Raptor Squadron, the best damn pilots in the 7th Fleet. At least that's what Nina told everyone. The pilots of Falcon Squadron would probably argue, but right now they were all on the same team. Raptor 2. Status check, Nina called over the squadron channel. Raptor 2, green and ready, came the response from Lieutenant Sam Murphy. He was her wingman, had been for 3 years. They had flown together through training exercises, pirate raids, and one very ugly encounter with slavers near the Proxima Belt. She trusted him with her life. The rest of the squadron checked in one by one. All 12 fighters were operational and loaded with mixed ordnance. Just like the big ships, they carried multiple weapon types to keep the swarm from adapting. Raptor Squadron, this is lead, Nina said calmly. Our job is to hit the swarm ships that are trying to flank the main fleet. These things are organic and they adapt fast, so don't use the same weapon twice in a row. Stay mobile, watch your wing, and remember your training. Let's show these things how humans fight. She pushed her throttle forward and her fighter screamed toward the swarm. Around her, space was full of fire and death. The big ships were still pounding away at the main swarm mass, turning hundreds of organic ships into expanding clouds of frozen biomass. But some of the swarm was trying to split off, trying to circle around and hit the human fleet from multiple angles. That's where the fighters came in. Nina locked onto her first target, a medium-sized swarm ship that was moving to intercept the Valkyrie. The thing looked like a massive tumor with tentacles pulsing with sick purple light. It was already adapting, growing armor plates where the railgun fire had hit it. Raptor 2 with me, 3 and 4. Take the one on the right. She didn't wait for confirmation. Her squadron knew their jobs. Nina armed her plasma torpedoes and waited until she was close enough to taste it. The swarm ship saw her coming and fired back, spraying bioacid and spines in her direction. Nina twisted her fighter through the attack, her hands and instincts working faster than conscious thought. This was what she had trained for her entire life. Her body had been shaped by Earth's gravity to handle extreme forces. Her mind had been honed by years of combat exercises. The swarm ship was dangerous, but it had never faced something like her. She fired 2 plasma torpedoes at point-blank range and pulled away hard, feeling the heat of the explosion wash over her shields. When she looked back, the swarm ship was gone, ripped apart from the inside. "Splash one," she reported calmly. "Raptor 3 and 4, we got ours," came another voice. Lieutenant Carlos Martinez sounded almost disappointed. "These things are tough, but they're not very smart. Don't get cocky," Nina warned. "They're learning. Stay sharp," she was right. As she lined up her next target, she saw it growing new armor, hardening its hull against plasma weapons. It had learned from watching its companion die. Nina smiled inside her helmet. "Okay, you want to play that game? Sam, hit it with kinetics." Her wingman responded immediately, firing a burst from his railgun. The metal slugs punched through the swarm ship's armor before it could adapt, and the thing came apart in a shower of frozen tissue. "That's how we do it," Sam said with satisfaction. Major Kyle Stevens led Falcon Squadron in from a different angle, targeting the swarm ships that were trying to overwhelm the human cruisers. Kyle was older than most fighter pilots, 38, but he was also better than most. He had learned to fly in atmosphere before moving to space, and that experience made him deadly in 3-dimensional combat. Falcon Squadron, spread out and engage at will. Remember to cycle your weapons. Don't give these things time to adapt. His fighters split into pairs, each team taking a different target. Kyle himself went after a particularly large swarm ship that was spitting bioplasma at the UHSV Ironside. The cruiser's shields were holding, but only barely. "Ironside, this is Falcon Leader. I'm going to take the heat off you." "Much appreciated, Falcon Leader," came the response from Ironside's captain. "That thing's been pounding us for 5 minutes." Kyle armed his missiles, a mix of conventional explosives and experimental photon warheads. He came in fast from below where the swarm ship's weapons had the worst angle. The thing tried to turn to face him, but it was too slow. Fighters were faster and more agile than any ship in space. He fired 4 missiles in quick succession, each one programmed to hit a different part of the swarm ship. The conventional explosives hit first, tearing open armor and exposing vulnerable tissue. The photon warheads followed, releasing bursts of concentrated light energy that burned through the creature like acid. The swarm ship shuddered and died, its massive bulk drifting away in pieces. "Ironside, you're clear," Kyle reported. "Thanks, Falcon Leader. Drinks are on us when we get back," Kyle grinned. "I'll hold you to that." Aboard the Valkyrie, Admiral Morrison watched the tactical display with approval. The fighters were doing exactly what fighters were supposed to do. Getting into spaces the big ships couldn't reach and hitting targets too small or fast for capital ship weapons. The swarm was starting to understand that it was in trouble. The organic ships were trying to retreat, pulling back toward the planet they had been besieging. But Morrison had no intention of letting them escape. "All ships pursue and destroy. Don't let any of them get away." The human fleet pushed forward, their weapons never stopping. The swarm tried to form a defensive line, but it was useless. Every tactic they tried, the humans had a counter. Every adaptation they made, the humans switched weapons. Commander Lisa Grant was coordinating the weapons fire from multiple ships, making sure they were cycling through different attack types. She had studied military history extensively, particularly ancient Earth naval battles. One of the key lessons was never to give your enemy time to adapt or recover. Keep hitting them, keep pressing, never let up. That's exactly what they were doing. Captain Helen Ward, commanding the Thunderhead, was having her best day in years. Her ship had expended over 60% of its missile loadout, and every single shot had hit something important. She was already planning the report she would write about swarm tactics and vulnerabilities. "Captain, we're detecting a larger mass moving up from the planet's surface," her sensor officer reported. "Looks like a swarm command ship, maybe their coordinator." Helen didn't hesitate. "Target it with everything we have left. If that thing's coordinating the swarm, killing it should break their organization." The Thunderhead and 2 other cruisers focused their fire on the larger swarm ship. It was trying to protect itself, growing armor and deploying smaller ships as shields. But it was too late. The concentrated fire was too much. Nuclear warheads, railgun slugs, plasma bolts, and laser beams all converged on the command ship simultaneously. For a moment, the thing seemed to glow from within, absorbing all that destructive energy. Then it simply came apart, exploding in a massive burst of biological matter. The effect on the rest of the swarm was immediate and dramatic. The smaller ships began moving erratically, their coordination gone. Some tried to flee, others attacked each other. The hive mind had been severed and the individual organisms didn't know what to do. "All ships exploit the confusion," Morrison ordered. "Take them apart." The human fleet did exactly that. Within 20 minutes, the organized swarm attack had become a rout. Within an hour, there were no more swarm contacts on the tactical display. Just debris and wreckage spreading through space. Nina Blake brought her fighter back toward the Warhawk, her squadron intact and undamaged. "Raptor Squadron, form up for recovery." "Good work today, people." "That was too easy," Sam commented. "I expected more of a fight from something that scared an entire empire." "They're adapted for overwhelming defenses, not fighting something that hits back this hard," Nina said. "We're probably the first species they've encountered that matches their aggression." As she guided her fighter into the Warhawk's landing bay, she thought about that. Humans weren't the biggest species in the galaxy. They weren't the smartest or the oldest. But they had evolved on a world that tried to kill them in 1,000 different ways. They had learned to fight, to adapt, to never give up. That's what made them dangerous. On the radiant dawn, Commander Velsera sat in her command chair, trying to process what she had just witnessed. The swarm that had destroyed her fleets, that had pushed her proud empire to the edge of extinction, had been eliminated in less than 6 hours. 6 hours. Her people had been fighting for months and barely slowed the swarm down. The humans had arrived and simply erased it from existence. Telvorn approached her carefully. "Commander, the humans are requesting communication." Velsera straightened in her chair, trying to regain some measure of dignity. "Open the channel." Admiral Morrison appeared on her screen again. This time his expression was slightly less hard. "Commander Velsera, the immediate threat around Karvath Prime has been neutralized. Your people are safe for now." The human fleet remained in the Karvathi system for 12 hours, giving their ships time to rearm and their crews time to rest. Admiral Morrison used that time to plan the assault on the swarm hive, but also to learn more about the species he had just saved. Lieutenant Commander Ryan Cross had been interviewing Karvathi scientists and military officers, gathering information about their encounter with the swarm 6 years ago. What he found disturbed him deeply. He stood in Morrison's private office, a small room just off the main command deck. The Admiral sat behind a desk that had seen better days, drinking what had to be his 10th cup of coffee. "Tell me what you found." "Ryan," Morrison said. Ryan pulled up a holographic display showing the asteroid where it all started. The Karvathi discovered a small swarm colony here, in a system they claimed as their territory. About 300 individual organisms building organic structures and apparently processing minerals from the asteroid. Did they try to communicate? No, sir. According to the reports, they scanned the organisms, determined they were biological rather than technological, and classified them as a contamination. They sent a sterilization team that burned the entire asteroid clean. No survivors, no attempt at first contact, nothing. Morrison's jaw tightened. They saw living things they didn't understand and just killed them all. It gets worse, sir. I spoke with the science officer who led the initial survey. He told me they detected signs of intelligence in the organisms, complex communication patterns, coordinated behavior. But because the things didn't use technology the way the Karvathi understand it, they dismissed the possibility of sentience. So they knew there was a chance these things were intelligent. And they killed them anyway. Ryan nodded slowly. They made a choice based on convenience and prejudice. The asteroid had resources they wanted, and the organisms were in the way. So they removed the problem. Morrison stood and walked to the viewport, staring out at the Karvathi homeworld. Beautiful cities, advanced civilization, millions of lives, all nearly destroyed because someone decided that organisms without technology weren't worth considering. How many died on Karvath Prime during the siege? He asked. Estimated 3 million casualties, sir, plus another 2 million across their other colonies. 5 million dead because of a mistake, because of arrogance. Morrison had seen a lot of bad decisions in his career, but this was particularly ugly. What do we know about the swarm itself? He asked. Ryan pulled up more data. They're definitely a hive intelligence, sir. Each organism is connected to a central consciousness through what appears to be quantum entanglement. The individual ships we destroyed were essentially fingers of a much larger entity. When we killed that command ship during the battle, we cut off the connection and the smaller units lost coordination. So the hive at the center, that's the real target. Yes, sir. Take out the hive and the entire species in this region dies. The individual organisms can't survive long without the central intelligence to guide them. Morrison turned back to face Ryan. You're saying if we do this, we're committing genocide. We're doing exactly what the Karvathi did, just on a larger scale. Ryan met his gaze steadily. Yes, sir. That's exactly what I'm saying. The two men stood in silence for a long moment. Finally, Morrison spoke. But if we don't do it, the swarm will keep attacking. They'll spread to other systems, consume other species. We have reports of at least 6 other civilizations in this region. How many of them will die if we let the swarm continue? I don't have an answer for that, sir. Neither do I, Ryan. But I know that sometimes the only way to stop a monster is to become one yourself, just for a moment. We're going to destroy that hive, and we're going to have to live with what that means. Ryan nodded and left the office, leaving Morrison alone with his thoughts and his coffee. On the radiant dawn, Commander Velsera was having a similar conversation with her own officers. The council had called an emergency session, and she was about to face questions she didn't want to answer. High Counselor Renthak looked older than he had just a day ago. Commander, the humans have agreed to eliminate the swarm hive. This will save our civilization. But at what cost? I don't understand the question, High Counselor, don't you? These humans, they're not like any species we've encountered before. They don't negotiate. They don't hesitate, they just act. They've destroyed thousands of swarm ships without mercy or restraint. What happens when they turn that aggression toward us? Velsera had been thinking about that herself. The humans have shown no hostile intent toward us. They responded to our distress call and helped us when we asked for mercy. Another council member spoke up, her voice sharp. But we didn't receive mercy, did we? We received war. Pure, efficient, terrifying war. These creatures are more violent than the swarm itself. They're more effective, Velsera corrected. There's a difference. Telvorn, standing beside her, added his own thoughts. The humans asked us if we provoked the swarm. They want to know why this war started. What did you tell them, Commander? Velsera had known this question was coming. I told them the truth, that we discovered a swarm colony 6 years ago and eliminated it without attempting communication, that we didn't recognize them as intelligent beings. The chamber erupted in angry voices. Some council members were outraged that she had admitted this to aliens. Others were defensive, insisting that they had done nothing wrong by removing a contamination from their territory. A few, like High Counselor Renthak, simply looked tired. He raised his hands for silence. Enough, what's done is done. Commander Velsera, you did the right thing by telling the humans the truth. We made a terrible mistake 6 years ago, and we've paid for it in blood. The question now is what we do next. The humans will eliminate the swarm hive, Velsera said. After that, Admiral Morrison said we would need to answer for our actions. I believe he means we need to face judgment from the galactic community. The Karvathi have never answered to anyone. One council member protested. Then perhaps it's time we learned. Renthak said quietly. Pride nearly destroyed us. Maybe humility will save us. Back on the Valkyrie, preparations for the assault were well underway. Admiral Morrison had divided his fleet, leaving half to protect the Carvathi system while taking the other half to strike the hive. It was a calculated risk, but he believed the swarm wouldn't attack again so soon after such a devastating defeat. Captain Greg Hamilton joined him on the command deck. "Admiral, I want to come with you to the hive. The Warhawk and our fighters could make a difference." Morrison shook his head. "I need you here, Greg. If I'm wrong and the swarm does attack, these people need protection. Besides, 8 ships should be enough for what we're planning, which is complete sterilization of the hive structure. We're going to burn it down to bedrock, make sure nothing survives to rebuild." Hamilton nodded slowly. "Scorched earth tactics. Are you sure that's necessary?" Ryan ran the numbers. "If we leave even a small portion of the hive alive, it could regenerate within months. We need to be thorough." "That's not what I meant, sir. I'm asking if you're sure we should be doing this at all. The Carvathi started this war by committing genocide. Shouldn't we find another way?" Morrison appreciated the question. Hamilton was a good officer and a good man, not afraid to challenge orders when he thought it was necessary. "I've thought about it," Morrison admitted, "but I keep coming back to the same conclusion. The swarm is a threat to everyone in this region. They've already killed millions, and they'll kill millions more if we don't stop them. Yes, the Carvathi provoked them. Yes, what we're about to do is horrible, but the alternative is worse." Hamilton studied his admiral's face. "You're going to carry this with you, aren't you? The weight of this decision. That's what command means, Greg. Making the hard choices and living with the consequences. If I'm wrong, if there was a better way, then that's on me. Not on my crew, not on the fleet. Just me. For what it's worth, sir, I think you're making the right call." "Thanks, Greg, but that doesn't make it easier." The assault fleet prepared to jump to the hive system. 8 warships, the Valkyrie, the Thunderhead, the Ironside, and 5 others. No fighters this time, just the heavy ships and their planet-killing weapons. Lieutenant Amy Porter ran final checks on the jump calculations. "Coordinates locked, Admiral. All ships report ready." Commander Lisa Grant had spent the last 12 hours programming firing solutions for every weapon system in the fleet. She had never planned an operation this large or this destructive before. "Sir, once we start the bombardment, there's no going back. The radiation alone will make that system uninhabitable for decades." "I know," Morrison said. "That's the point. We're not just killing the hive. We're making sure nothing can grow there again." He opened a fleet-wide channel. "This is Admiral Morrison to all ships. In a few minutes, we're going to jump to the swarm hive system and eliminate the primary threat to this region. What we're about to do is necessary but not pleasant. We're going to destroy an entire species because they've become a danger to others. Remember that. Remember why we're doing this. Not for glory, not for revenge, but because sometimes peace requires violence." He paused, then added, "When we get home, when people ask what we—" The swarm hive system was dead before the humans ever arrived. No planets orbited the dim red star. Only 3 massive moons that had been completely consumed by organic growth. What had once been rocky satellites were now writhing masses of biological tissue, pulsing with sick purple light. Billions of individual organisms covered every surface, connected by tendrils of living matter that stretched between the moons like veins. Admiral Morrison stood on the bridge of the Valkyrie, staring at the sight on his main screen. Even after 30 years in space, seeing something this alien still affected him. This wasn't a civilization. It was a cancer that had learned to spread between stars. "Sensor readings?" he asked. Lieutenant Amy Porter studied her displays, her face pale. "Sir, I'm reading organic matter across all 3 moons. The total biomass is difficult to calculate, but we're talking about trillions of individual organisms, maybe more. The central intelligence appears to be distributed across multiple nodes rather than concentrated in one location." Lieutenant Commander Ryan Cross added his analysis. "The hive has already detected us, sir. I'm picking up increased activity across all 3 moons. They know we're here and they're preparing defenses." Morrison nodded. He had expected that. A hive intelligence this large would have sensory organs throughout the system. They probably knew about the attack on Carvath Prime within hours of it happening. "Good," he said simply. "I want them to know what's coming." Commander Lisa Grant looked up from her weapons console. "Sir, we have firing solutions on all 3 moons. Conventional bombardment will take hours to penetrate deep enough to ensure complete destruction. I recommend we start with nuclear penetrators to crack the outer layers, then follow up with plasma bombardment to sterilize the interior." "Do it. All ships commence bombardment on my mark." He paused, taking one last moment to consider what they were about to do. Then he gave the order that would end an entire species. Mark. The 8 human warships opened fire simultaneously. Nuclear missiles streaked toward the 3 moons, each one programmed to penetrate as deeply as possible before detonating. The first impacts came seconds later, and even from thousands of kilometers away, the explosions were visible as bright flashes against the purple biomass. The swarm responded immediately. Massive tentacles erupted from the moon's surfaces, reaching toward the human ships. Bioplasma weapons fired, spraying corrosive material into space. Smaller organisms launched themselves like missiles, trying to close the distance and attach to the human hulls. But Morrison had learned from the battle at Karvath Prime. He had positioned his ships at maximum range, far enough that the swarm's organic weapons couldn't reach effectively. The human warships had been designed to deliver destruction from a distance, and that's exactly what they did. Wave after wave of nuclear warheads struck the moons. Each explosion created a crater of superheated rock and vaporized tissue. The swarm tried to adapt, growing armor, deploying shields of densely packed organisms. Nothing worked. The sheer volume of fire was too much. Captain Helen Ward commanded the Thunderhead's bombardment with grim efficiency. Her ship had been rearmed before leaving the Karvathi system, and she was determined to use every single weapon they carried. Fire missiles 30 through 45. Target the largest concentration of biomass on Moon 2. Her tactical officer executed the order, and 15 nuclear warheads left their tubes in quick succession. Helen watched the tactical display as they impacted, each one adding to the growing devastation. "How long until we've achieved saturation bombardment?" she asked. "At this rate, approximately 4 hours until we've hit every major population center, Captain." "Too slow. Double our rate of fire. I want this over faster." The Thunderhead increased its bombardment and the other ships followed suit. Space filled with missiles and energy beams, a constant stream of destruction flowing toward the 3 moons. The swarm was dying, but it wasn't dying quietly. The Hive intelligence, faced with its own extinction, launched a desperate counterattack. Millions of small organisms, each no larger than a human fist, shot into space like a living cloud. They moved with purpose, forming up into larger masses that accelerated toward the human fleet. "Sir, we have incoming," Amy Porter reported. "Looks like biological missiles. Thousands of them." "Point defense weapons, engage at will," Morrison ordered calmly. The Valkyrie and her sister ships activated their close-in weapon systems. Automated cannons tracked and destroyed the incoming organisms, filling space with metal slugs that shredded the biological missiles before they could reach their targets. A few got through, but they splattered harmlessly against the ship's shields. Ryan Cross watched the slaughter with growing discomfort. He was a scientist first, and seeing an entire species erased from existence went against every instinct he had, but he also understood the math. The swarm had killed millions already. If left alive, it would kill millions more. Sometimes survival meant doing terrible things. "Admiral, I'm detecting a large energy surge from Moon 1, he reported. "The Hive is concentrating power for something big." Morrison didn't hesitate. "Target Moon 1 with everything we have. Kill it before it can fire." Every ship in the fleet redirected their fire toward the first moon. The concentrated bombardment was devastating. Nuclear fire tore through the organic tissue, burning away layer after layer. Whatever the swarm had been preparing, it never got the chance to use it. The energy surge collapsed and the moon itself began to break apart. The death of the first moon seemed to send shockwaves through the entire Hive. The coordinated attacks from the other 2 moons became erratic, desperate. The Hive intelligence was fragmenting, pieces of it dying as the nuclear fire consumed its physical substrate. Lisa Grant monitored the bombardment with professional detachment. She had programmed these firing solutions knowing exactly what they would do. Every warhead, every energy beam was calculated to maximize destruction. She was good at her job, maybe the best in the fleet. Right now, she hated being good at her job. "Admiral, we've destroyed 60% of the biomass on all 3 moons, she reported. "At this rate, total sterilization in 2 more hours. Keep firing." "I want nothing left alive," the bombardment continued. Hour after hour, the human warships poured fire into the dying Hive. The purple light that had illuminated the moons faded, replaced by the red glow of burning organic matter. The tentacles that had reached toward the fleet withered and died. The desperate counterattack stopped coming. By the time the sun rose over the Karvathi homeworld 3 systems away, the swarm hive was gone. 3 moons that had been covered in living tissue were now scorched rocks, their surfaces glazed with radioactive glass. Nothing moved. Nothing lived. The hive intelligence that had existed for thousands of years, that had consumed dozens of worlds, that had killed millions of beings, was extinct. Admiral Morrison stood on his bridge looking at what they had done. The tactical display showed 3 dead moons and 8 human warships, all intact. A perfect military victory. A complete genocide. All ships cease fire, he said quietly. Conduct final scans to confirm total elimination of the target. Amy Porter ran the scans, checking and rechecking the data. No life signs detected, sir. No energy readings. No movement. The hive is completely destroyed. Any possibility of regeneration? Ryan Cross shook his head. No, sir. We've destroyed the central intelligence and sterilized the physical substrate. Even if a few individual organisms survived somewhere, they can't rebuild without the hive consciousness to guide them. The swarm in this region is extinct. Morrison nodded slowly. Transmit our findings to the Karvathi. Let them know the threat is eliminated. Then plot a course back to their system. We're done here. As the fleet prepared to jump back to Karvathi space, Morrison retreated to his office. He sat down at his desk, pulled out a tablet, and began writing his report. He documented everything, the bombardment, the casualties, the decision-making process. When historians looked back at this day, they would have the full truth, not a sanitized version. He had destroyed an entire species. That fact would be in his report, in his official record, and in his own mind for the rest of his life. He wouldn't hide from it. He wouldn't justify it. He had made a choice, and now he would live with it. The fleet jumped back to the Karvathi system where Captain Greg Hamilton and the other half of the fleet waited. There had been no further swarm attacks, exactly as Morrison had predicted. The remaining swarm elements in the region were dying off without the hive to guide them. Commander Velsera received the transmission from the Valkyrie with mixed emotions. Her people were safe. The threat was eliminated. But the price had been the complete destruction of another species, even one that had tried to destroy her own. Admiral Morrison requested a final meeting, and she agreed. His face appeared on her screen, and she could see something had changed. He looked older, tired in a way that had nothing to do with physical exhaustion. Commander Velsera, the Zelthor swarm has been eliminated. Your people are no longer in danger. Thank you, Admiral. The Karvathi owe you everything. You don't owe me anything, Morrison said firmly. But you do owe the galaxy an explanation. What happened here? What your people did 6 years ago, that needs to be made public. Other species need to know what can